Okay, so moving on. Okay, new vocabulary number 2. Okay, classification. 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 Classification is a word that means type or group. Here's an example sentence. An animal classification system was developed so that scientists could group similar animal species together to study. Example, feline. Feline is a classification of animal. Example of feline class would be cat, lion, tiger. All of these are types of feline. That is the big one, and they have small one. Okay, that's the same idea. Classification. Classification. Okay, the next word is industrial. 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 And industrial means anything related to factory or power plant. So it's things that you produce or make. Example, the Industrial Revolution refers to a time period where products began to be built in large factories. So there's a time when people started to make factories to make things a lot faster and all the same quality and size. Okay? This didn't happen overnight. It's a new period of time. And that period of time is called the Industrial Revolution. But because before that, we didn't have industry very well. It just had each people making things themselves. And only tiny company or federation of or people working together. But later, they create company and they have employee. This is more industrial, making factories. Okay. And the last one is the word domestic. 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 Domestic just means home or at home. So here's an example sentence. Domestic helpers are migrant workers who live in another person's home in order to take care of their elderly relatives. That is domestic helper because they live in the home. That's domestic, at home. So if I ask you, what kind of helpers are the migrant workers that have to live inside someone's home? You will say, oh, I remember, it's domestic because there's home. Domestic home. Domestic home. Okay. So now I want to ask you, in your opinion, what is a fair salary? Well, the government came out with an answer for that. Even just this last year, they changed what is considered a fair salary. Now, these salaries are for anyone who works in any company in Taiwan. They are called the minimum wage. Minimum means the lowest possible. They cannot be any lower than the minimum wage. And they said the minimum wage should be 26,400 NT dollars a month. So if it's a wage, you can't pay anyone a smaller wage than 26,400 NTD every month. Or if they're hourly, so maybe they don't work the full time, 40 hours, they only work 10 hours or 15 hours. You can still only pay them no less. So you can't pay them 170, it has to be no less than 176. It can be more than 176, but the minimum is 176 NT dollars per hour. So this is the new minimum wage. So Taiwanese government realized that you cannot pay people too little money or they will not be able to survive. They cannot afford their own house, cannot afford their own family. And these are all big problems in Taiwanese society. Taiwanese society is getting older and older, but at the same time, they're having less and fewer babies. So this is a big problem. And to try to fix that, they make this minimum wage standard. But also because it's fair to pay people what they're worth. Their labor is, not all the labor is equal. Some people work harder and some people work less hard. But if you pay people less than they're able to live, then that's just exploitation. And the government realized that if they give people too less money than what they're actually worth, then they just will suffer and be in poverty, and it will also make everybody look bad in the country. So there's many reasons why they should follow it. But they have something what we call a double standard. This means they have one set of rules for one group of people and a different set of rules for the other. So, in September 14th of last year, the Ministry of Labor announced a new minimum wage of 400 NT dollars per hour, per month, I mean, or 176 NT dollars per hour. That means employers are not supposed to be paid less than that. Okay? But domestic care workers, the workers that live inside the house, remember domestic house? They're not covered by the Ministry of Labor. So this is a government agency that is in charge of employment. But because domestic care workers are not considered employee under the labor guidance, um, that means that there's a loophole. They're on a different under a different organization than labor. So this organization doesn't have to follow minimum wage rule because they only one agency had the rule. So because Taiwan's bureaucracy is just a government structure. It's very strict. So if you have one group, that group make rules, but only within whatever they're in control of. Then you have another group, the same problem, only in charge of their thing. So the laws often don't match up. And because it's so rigid, so cannot move the rules, bend the rules at all. So what ends up happening is that when one set of rules change, it takes a long time for another agency to change the same rule. And so there's all this fighting inside government, also politics. It happened. All governments have this problem, but Taiwan's is especially rigid. Many other governments have some flexibility. They work together. Some of the agencies decide to work together, but not in Taiwan. It's not as often. In Taiwan, very, very rigid. If you make a mistake with paperwork or you do something outside the rules of the agency, they will not be able to help you. They will say, no, it doesn't matter if it's a common mistake. It doesn't matter if your situation is special and you need it done. No. That's good and bad. Good because that way people know exactly what the rules are. But it's bad when something doesn't fit. So it means that the laws have to be very, very specific. Cannot be too vague. And so that's what happened here. There is a big loophole where the domestic care workers do not fall under the same agency as normal worker. Therefore, they have no minimum wage. So that means employers can offer whatever money they want and just wait until somebody says they want to work for that job. But the problem is there's also no control. So these foreign workers often cannot speak Chinese or read Chinese. So they will get tricked. Somebody looking for trying to set up the job. They will ask somebody with English skill to put up a job posting, and they might put a huge pay or a really good deal to come work for them. The people will come, and then they say, actually, this is not the salary. This is like with a bonus or something. They'll tack on some condition. Say, actually, you have to work this amount of hours, and then you have to make this kind of performance. But they're just a normal person in the house, so they don't know how to measure performance accurately. They just use it as a way to keep the salary super low. Or maybe the foreign worker, their salary at home is already so tiny. So when they're offered something higher than what they get at home, it seemed like a good deal. But they don't know because they don't know how to ask around. They can't read very well the rules of what the minimum wage should be. And so they get stuck. Maybe they don't have proper internet access, or maybe they can't speak English either. So now they're stuck. They just try to make a decision on how they can help their family the best and don't realize that they're getting exploited. We talked about that before. Being paid too little money for what they really need to survive. According to some surveys and job postings about domestic helper, the average salary in the current market for domestic helper is only 17,000 NT dollar. That is much lower than the minimum wage if you see. So only 17,000, and that's the average salary. So the middle salary. That means there's still half the people make less money. Well, not exactly, but it means that a lot of people are making less money and a few making more. It's not exactly middle. Average doesn't mean middle. It's hard to explain, but it means that most people are making 17,000, and there's some people making more and some people making less. Okay, and the last category of offshore fishermen are the other category of migrant worker. They work in water near Taiwan, and they also fall under a different government agency that is in charge of ocean. So not labor again, only in charge of ocean, conservation and making the ocean cleaner, or making sure they don't fish too much fish. But that agency doesn't know how to worry about labor practice because they're only worried about conservation and fish. So what ends up happening is they don't know how to enforce this kind of minimum wage. And there also is no minimum wage here. Also, many of these boats hide outside of Taiwan water. And then they pay the worker very tiny wage and never let the worker come to the Taiwanese shore, even though the company is Taiwanese. And as a result, these are the lowest paid migrant worker. Some of these migrant worker only make 3,000 to 9,000 NT dollars. So only tiny amount compared to this minimum wage. 9,000 a month versus 26,400 a month. So they're not making any money at all. Also, they are often tricked to do this. And they also forced to work 12 or more hours every day. So from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And that's illegal in Taiwan. You're not supposed to make people work this long. And if they do, they have to pay them overtime. So that's another thing. If you work more hours than your contracts say, then your company had to pay you the normal salary plus extra money. So that's called overtime pay. But because these two categories of migrant worker do not fall under the Ministry of Labor, these laws don't apply to them. So, as you can imagine, if there's no law there, a proper law, then people will take advantage. And because the people don't know better, they can't speak Chinese, can't speak English, then they're taken advantage of. And maybe you think, well, it's their fault to do this. But just think about once enough people from these other countries hear about being mistreated, they will not want to come and work here anymore. Maybe you think, oh, we don't need them. But we do need them. I just talked about it before. We need people to do these jobs. If there's no one taking care of the grandma, then all the old people will not survive. They will start dying off too quick, not able to take care of themselves. Or Taiwan's fishing industry will collapse. And Taiwan's fishing industry is one of the ways that Taiwan make a lot of money. Or the chip manufacturer, if they mistreat the worker in the factory house, in the dormitory, then there won't be enough workers to make the chips anymore. All of Taiwan's economy will just collapse overnight. Nobody comes to work here. Nobody wants to work here anymore because of these people acting like this. That's awful. That's a terrible thing for you and me. We will all suffer from this. So that's another reason. One, it's important to take care of people, to treat people fairly. But also, there are consequences if you don't.